The morning started out peaceful, the kind of quiet that only wide stretches of private land can give you. My ranch sits just beyond the tree line, where the subdivision ends and the world begins to feel open again. It's mine. Not leased. Not part of any development deal, not governed by anyone's neighborhood association bylaws. I've got the deed, signed and sealed, and I like it that way. The only rules here are mine, and I prefer it quiet. That's why I nearly choked on my coffee when I looked out and saw cars lined up along the dirt road. At first, I thought maybe someone was lost. GPS sometimes sends people the wrong way, and I've had my fair share of strangers pull in, roll down their window, and ask, "Is this Maple Drive?" But then another car pulled in, and another. Before I knew it, a steady stream of minivans and SUVs was spilling onto my land, kicking up dust as they draped past the fence line that very clearly reads private property, no trespassing. I set my mug down on the porch railing and squinted. People weren't just driving in, they were unloading. Folding chairs, coolers, picnic baskets, and even a bounce house. A bounce house. A small crowd of kids had already gathered around as some guy yanked an extension cord across my grass, trying to find an outlet. "What the hell?" I muttered, setting my mug down harder than I meant to. My boots crunched on the gravel as I headed out, trying to make sense of it. By the time I got closer, the scene was almost surreal. A canopy tent had been pitched like this was some kind of festival. Tables were being dressed with plastic tablecloths, and someone had already set up a Bluetooth speaker blasting out a top 40 playlist. People milled around with the casual confidence of folks who think they belong. The kicker. None of these people were strangers. They were from the subdivision on the other side of the tree line. The HO crowd. And right at the center of it all was her president, Karen. She was hard to miss, tall, sharp haircut, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown, clipboard in hand, barking orders at anyone within earshot. "Make sure the grill's set up near the back. Oh, and don't let the kids near that ditch. Safety first," she called out with all the authority of a queen holding court. I walked straight up to her. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" She turned toward me, smiled as though I were a waiter at her favorite restaurant, and said, "Perfect timing. We're setting up for the annual neighborhood party. We needed more space this year, so we decided to use this field." I stared at her, certain I hadn't heard correctly. "You decided to use this field?" "Yes," she said with a firm nod. "The HO voted on it last week. Everyone agreed your land would be the best option. It's spacious, it's flat, and frankly, it's wasted just sitting here. The community needs it more than you do. Blink, my land, my deed, my taxes, my responsibility." And somehow, in her mind, a handful of HOA members scribbling their signatures on a piece of paper was enough to rewrite the law of ownership. You realize this isn't community property, right? This is my ranch, my land. Private. You can't just wander in here with your folding chairs and declare it yours. Her smile faltered, but only for a second. Then she puffed herself up and said, "Well, you weren't using it. And it's directly adjacent to our neighborhood. Honestly, it just makes sense. You should be glad, really. It'll bring people that is goodwill." That word sat sour in my mouth. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I held it back. Yelling wasn't going to get through to someone like her. People like Karen operate on a different wavelength, where logic doesn't matter and arrogance is oxygen. "You're trespassing," I said flatly. She waved a hand like I was a child tugging on her sleeve. "Don't be dramatic. We'll clean up when it's over. By sundown you won't even know we were here. Now if you'll excuse me, I have things to organize." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity, but instead I took a slow breath. Beyond the tree line, I could see the faint shadows moving. Boone and Daisy were out there, just starting their morning roam. Most people would have panicked at the thought of two massive grizzly bears wandering around their property, but I had permits, licenses, and years of experience working with rescues. They weren't pets, not exactly, but they were mine to look after, and they were legal. My land gave them the space they needed, and I gave them the care. The HO, of course, had no idea, and right then, watching Karen wave her clipboard and her minions set up like they were tailgating on a college lawn, I realized something. This was going to end badly. For them. I stepped closer to her, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "You sure you want to do this?" As she smirked, thinking I was bluffing. "Don't worry. Like I said, we'll be out of your hair by sundown. No harm done." I looked out at the kids bouncing in the half-inflated castle, at the men setting up coolers of beer, at the women laying out casseroles and plastic cutlery. None of them seemed remotely aware of where they actually were. They thought this was just an extension of their little HOA kingdom. I folded my arms, let a small grin tug at the corner of my mouth, and said, "All right. Don't say I didn't warn you." Then I turned and walked back toward the porch, leaving them to their illusion of control. Because the thing about illusions is that reality has a way of tearing them down. And reality, in this case, weighed nearly 900 pounds and had claws that could dig trenches through solid earth. The growl would come soon enough. The first sign came in the form of silence. The music from the Bluetooth speaker thumped, the kids still squealed in the bounce house, and the chatter of suburban small talk filled the air, but nature itself had gone quiet. No birds called from the trees. No crickets hummed in the tall grass. It was the kind of stillness that prickled at the back of your neck, the kind that makes you set down your drink and look around without knowing why. I knew why. From the tree line came a low, rumbling growl, a sound so deep it seemed to rise up from the ground itself. Boone stepped out first, massive shoulders rolling as he pushed through the underbrush. His brown coat shimmered under the afternoon sun, every step deliberate, powerful, unstoppable. Daisy followed close behind, slightly smaller but just as imposing, her head low, sniffing the air. They had caught the scent of grilled meat and potato salad, the kind of aroma even a human couldn't ignore. To a grizzly, it was irresistible. The reaction was immediate. A woman at the food table froze, the serving spoon clattering against the casserole dish. A child pointed from the bounce house, his voice high and thin. Mommy, big dogs. The chatter fell away as one by one heads turned toward the tree line. When the first real scream tore through the crowd, chaos hit the grass. Drinks toppled. Someone yelled, "Bears," in a tone that was half warning, half wail. Parents snatched up their children, dropping folding chairs in their scramble. People tripped over one another, a wave of panic breaking in every direction. The Bluetooth speaker went silent as someone yanked the cord out, and for a heartbeat, all that remained was the heavy, deliberate breathing of Boone and Daisy. Karen's scream cut above it all. She clutched her clipboard like it was a shield and shrieked, "Somebody call animal control, hurry." Boone lumbered closer, sniffing at the air, his massive head swinging toward the smell of hamburgers sizzling on the grill. The poor man who'd been flipping patties a moment ago abandoned his post and bolted, leaving the spatula clattering to the ground. Daisy, more curious than hungry, padded toward the bounce house, sniffing at the colorful, inflatable castle as it wobbled under the sudden stillness of terrified children inside. One brave little girl whispered, "They're so big," before her mother yanked her out by the arm and fled. I stayed calm. This wasn't my first time handling Boone and Daisy around people. They weren't tame, not in the sense of being trained pets, but they knew me, they trusted me. And when I whistled, sharp and clear, both heads turned my way instantly. "A sit," I called, my voice steady, commanding. To the horror of the HOA crowd, plopping down on their haunches like obedient dogs, massive paws pressed against the grass. The ground seemed to tremble under their weight. The crowd went still, unsure if this was a miracle or some kind of nightmare trick. I walked forward slowly, my boots punching on the gravel. My heart was pounding, but outwardly I kept my movements controlled. Boone rumbled low in his throat as I approached, not with aggression, but with expectation. Daisy huffed, her eyes flicking toward me, waiting. "It's all right," I said quietly, close enough now that only they could hear. "You've made your point." Behind me, the HOA members clung to one another, whispering frantically. Someone asked if they should run for their cars. Another muttered about lawsuits. Finally found her voice again. What are those doing here?" she stammered, pointing a trembling finger at the bears. I turned to her, letting the silence stretch just long enough for her to squirm. "Those," I said calm, "live here. Legally. I'm licensed, trained, and permitted to care for rescued grizzlies on my property." Her jaw dropped. "You keep bears." I shrugged as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "Some people keep dogs. I keep grizzlies. Difference is, my animals don't trespass on other people's lawns." A few people gasped. A couple even chuckled nervously, but Karen didn't. Her lips pressed thin, her eyes darting between me and the bears. She was calculating, probably already picturing the HOA meeting where she'd try to spin this as a public safety issue. But right now, surrounded by terrified neighbors and 2,000 pounds of fur and muscle, she wasn't in control. And she knew it. One of the kids, a boy maybe 10 years old, peeked from behind his father's legs and whispered, "Can I pet them?" The father nearly strangled him, pulling him back. "Now, don't you dare." I chuckled softly, scratching Boone behind the ear where he liked it most. He leaned into my hand, rumbling like a truck engine, completely at ease. Daisy pawed the ground once, bored now that the initial excitement had passed. I said, raising my voice enough for everyone to hear, "This is why you don't just waltz onto someone else's land. You don't know what you're stepping into. You thought this was free space for your HO party, but it's not. It's mine." I gestured to Boone and Daisy, who sat like sentinels at my side. A man in the crowd finally shouted, "Let's go, get to the cars." That broke the last of the paralysis. Families scrambled, lugging coolers and chairs if they could, abandoning them if they couldn't. Engines roared to life as doors slammed, tires spun, and one by one, The SUVs and minivans tore out the way they came. In less than Tilde was empty except for scattered trash, a half-deflated bounce house, and Karen. She stood frozen, her clipboard still clutched to her chest, staring at me like she'd just seen the devil himself. "Well," I said finally, "party's over." She opened her mouth, shut it, then opened it again, words failing her. Finally, she managed, This isn't over." I smiled calm and easy, giving Boone a pat on the head. "It's over, and if you've got any sense, you'll make sure it never happens again. You wouldn't want to upset Boone and Daisy, would you?" Boone chose that moment to huff loudly, a gust of hot air blasting from his massive nostrils, and Karen flinched so hard she nearly dropped her clipboard. Without another word, she turned on her heel and marched to her car, slamming the door so hard the echo rang across the empty field. When the dust cleared and I was alone again, I crouched down, scratching both bears behind the ears. "Good job, you two," I murmured. "Scared them off better than any no trespassing sign ever could." Boone licked my hand, Daisy rolled on her side like an oversized puppy, and I leaned back on my heels, laughing softly. For the first time all day, peace returned to my land, and I knew, deep in my gut, the HOA would never dare step foot here again.